All right, we are going to start the webinar. Okay, let me get the slideshow back up. And oops, that's not up. Okay. All right, webinar on season extension. Okay, so basically season extension is, providing some kind of structures to protect your plants from winter weather and especially from the wind in the winter. And all this also involves using a lot of mulch. I know I talk about mulch all the time, and it's especially important in the winter because it helps insulate the soil from rapidly changing temperatures and helps protect the roots of the plants. So you want to use some kind of protection, usually, and in a pinch, you could probably use a blanket or something, like if there's a late frost in the spring, to keep plants covered. But if you're going to do something over the whole winter, you'll want specialized row cover, also called frost cloth. And there's different thicknesses and stuff, which I'll talk about how to choose the right variety. And then you also, there's some luck involved in season extension and winter gardening. If it, say, it drops below 0 degrees, there's probably not much you can do to keep your plants alive. But most of the time, our winters are fairly mild, and we can keep plants alive, 12 months out of the year. So we're going to talk more about the specifics of season extension. And row cover comes in different grades, and obviously the thicker it is, the more frost protection it provides. However, the thicker it is, the less light gets through, and so it's kind of a balance between frost protection on the one hand, and then your plants actually getting some sunlight. So what we do is we give out the 1 ounce fabric. Usually this is identified with a number in the 30s. So this would be Agribon 30 or GrowGuard 34, which is the brand names. And this number means that you can tell how much sunlight the fabric will block by this number. So it's going to block 30% of the sunlight. So it'll only allow 70% of the sunlight to get through your plants. So that's a consideration. You can get up to 50 or beyond grades of fabric, but again, that's going to cut your sunlight out, and that can make plants grow more slowly in the winter if they're covered full time. So the 1 ounce fabric that we give out offers 2 to 4 degrees of frost protection. So this is for summer plants like peppers and tomato. Well, probably not going to be able to fit a tomato under one of these hoops, but you can fit peppers under them usually. This means that these summer plants will be able to survive light freezes under cloth. So something down to say 30 degrees when they would normally die right at 32 degrees. So that gives you a couple degrees to protection. And there's definitely some years when I've kept peppers alive, until December. And that's, again, lots of luck that you don't get a hard frost before then. So this is good if we're just getting some light frost. It'll keep summer plants alive. But for cold hardy plants like kales and broccoli and everything, this cloth doesn't actually prevent them from freezing. So but it does protect them from getting desiccated from the wind. That's actually what will kill a lot of plants. It's not necessarily the freezing. If it's a frost tolerant plant, the plant doesn't mind being frozen, but the wind and the air circulation can dry the plant cells out, and so they die that way. So these they do provide a little bit, they do warm the air around the plants a little bit, but they will still, you'll still see that the plants are frozen under there when it gets, below 28 degrees or something. But it'll keep the plants from drying out. And so once temperatures warm up, the plants pop back alive and they're totally fine. So it's not, so yeah, I think that can kind of confuse people because I think it's supposed to prevent the plants from freezing altogether. And the frost cloth usually will do well, till about 10 or 15 degrees. If it gets much below that for too long of a time, a lot of plants, that can kill them. Some plants don't care, like collards. It has to get really, really cold to kill collards. But other things, like some broccolis or cauliflower, are a little more sensitive, and so they may die if it gets below, say, like 20 degrees or something. So it just depends on the variety. It depends on how cold it is when we're talking about protection. And then also with season extension, it's not necessarily the cold that's the problem. The plants don't mind under the cloth. They don't mind if it gets too very cold necessarily. However, it can get too warm under the tunnels. And so this is the really big consideration around season extension. You want to watch the temperature. So if it's going to get above 45 degrees outside, it has the potential, just, you know, with the greenhouse effect under this cloth, to get up in the 90s under the fabric. And this is especially true if you're using plastic. It can warm up a lot faster and a lot hotter under plastic. So you have a little more flexibility with the cloth. But you do need to be watching the weather forecast. If it's going to be above 45 degrees during the day, then you need to get the cloth, put it to the side of the hoops so that it's not over the plants, because it can get too hot for your plants, and that kind of going back and forth between really cold and then, you know, temperatures in the 90s, plants can lose their frost tolerance, and they can just basically get fried under the cloth. So that is something you can't just leave it on there and ignore it. You do need to pay attention to the weather forecast. And the other consideration besides row cover and air circulation is that the mulch helps even out the temperature on the ground. And so if we get a really hard frost, sometimes this can cause the ground to buckle and heave. And if part of the ground is frozen and part of the ground is unfrozen, and the plant's roots are in, you know, different zones of ground, and the ground heaves, sometimes plants can separate from their roots, and so obviously that'll kill the plant. So mulch really helps even out the temperature of the ground so that it freezes and thaws more slowly. So the heaving is caused by a rapid temperature. So a thick layer of mulch can help, you know, prevent that from happening. So the mulch combined with the row cover can kind of help create a little more temperate environment around the plants in the winter. So I recommend both. And you will see, if you look online, you'll see plenty of examples of low tunnels using, you know, plastic or cloth. And I prefer cloth for a number of reasons. But if you do want to go the route of plastic and you want to purchase plastic, make sure you're getting a UV resistant greenhouse grade plastic. You can't just use any, you know, regular plastic you buy from the hardware store. You really need something that's rated for greenhouses, and you can buy, you know, smaller sheets of plastic for low tunnels. I think Mize Home and Garden Supply sells it. If not, you'll have to order it online. I would look for like a 6 mil plastic if you want to get one. And then if you take care of it and bring it, you know, you roll it up and bring it inside in the summer, you should be able to get 2 or 3 years out of it. So it's a you know, a decent investment. But again, plastic traps more heat than the cloth does. So, I mean, with the cloth, you have a little more wiggle room, but with plastic, I mean, anytime you get above 40, especially if it's going to be above 45, you need to get the plastic off of the rows. Otherwise, you're going to cook everything underneath them. And then the cloth is also water permeable and the plastic is not. So plants need less water in the winter, but if you, you know, with the plastic, you'll have to consider getting water to the plants occasionally. So you'll have to have a plan for what that's going to look like. Again, fabric is permeable to water and to air, so it's not going to heat up as much. The fabric is generally a lot cheaper. Also, we're giving it out, so it's free to you in this case. And then you can also double the fabric up. So if it's going to be super cold, you can put a couple layers of fabric over your plants for more protection. It's harder to do that with plastic. And then fabric also has especially this thicker frost cloth grade fabric. Some of the insect barrier fabric that's really light tears easily, but this stuff usually doesn't rip anywhere near as much. So you can get 3 or 4 years out of your fabric. And again, I prefer fabric, and that's why we're giving it out. And then, so you need something for the fabric to go over. So talk a little bit about hoops. And we're giving out galvanized wire hoops, which are flexible, lightweight. They're not all that tall, but they're great for short crops like lettuce, spinach, root vegetables, baby greens. Sometimes you can get kale, broccoli, collards underneath them, but sometimes these crops can get too tall for these kind of hoops. We're giving out 7-foot wide cloth, which will go over these hoops. The wire hoops can sometimes get bent out of shape if we get a really heavy snow, but most of the time they're pretty sturdy, and they will hold on to it. But you have a couple of options for hoops if you want to build your own. This is an example where you can just put some rebar into the ground, and then you can loop 1/2-inch PVC pipe over it. You'll probably want like a 10-foot section of pipe to do this. Just pound the rebar in the ground, bend the hoop over it. PVC is a little more flexible than the wire. Will pop back into shape, but it can still snap if we get too much snow. We generally do not have that much snow in East Tennessee. You will also need clamps in order to keep the plastic on these hoops. On the I guess the con, so this is sturdier. You can make it taller for taller crops. The cons is that it's more expensive to build than the wire hoops, and you're also going to need wider fabric. So we're giving out 7-foot wide fabric, and for these you'll probably need 10-foot wide fabric, which you'll have to purchase either from Mize or find it online. Your other option is to use EMT electrical conduit, the 1/2-inch kind, which you can buy from a hardware store. This is the most expensive. I think these things cost about $3 a pole, somewhere in there, $2.50 or $3 a pole. And then you'll also need to use, we have a hoop bender, just a special little gadget that we've screwed down to a bench. And so if you want to buy this conduit, and it's especially good on raised beds, I found it's a little harder to use in earth gardens. It's just kind of, you have to like clamp the ends of the conduit into a point so that they'll kind of bust through the ground. Otherwise, I found it really difficult to get them into the soil. But if this is something you want to try out, you just holler at me and I will meet you at the hoop bender and show you how to use the thing. It doesn't take too long to bend the conduit, but it probably takes, I don't know, 2 or 3 minutes per hoop. So kind of, figure your time needs in that. And then again, you'll also need the 10-foot wide cloth in order to get it over these hoops. And you'll need clamps as well to keep the cloth on. And you can, I think Johnny sells special clamps that will fit 1/2-inch wide conduit that'll pop right on. But if you go online, there's a number of DIY options for clipping it on there. You don't need the clips for the wire hoops that we're giving out. So just FYI. So when you're constructing the low tunnels, you want to set hoops about 4 feet apart. That's probably as far as you want them to go. Maybe with the EMT hoops, you can maybe get them 5 or 6 feet apart. It just depends. The closer together, the sturdier the whole thing's going to be. And then you want to make sure your cloth is cut so that it is 6 to 10 feet longer at both ends than the length of your tunnel. So if you want to build a 20-foot long tunnel, you want 30 or 40 feet of cloth just to make sure you have enough to close the ends down of the tunnels. And then you will need lots of blunt, heavy objects to hold the cloth down. This could be, you know, spare T-posts, bricks. People use sandbags, etc. Even just large clods of dirt, rocks, whatever. You just need a plan in place for holding the things down on the edges over the hoops. And then the tighter you can make everything, the more resistant to snow damage, the sturdier thing it'll be. There are tons and tons of online tutorials out there, and we will, Rosie and I will probably make a little video showing folks how to construct a tunnel when we get all the materials in. So there's tons of ideas out there for season extensions, so you can really figure out what is going to work for you and your garden situation the best. And then here's again, lots of ideas. Here's some Chores, so you can see some PVC, the galvanized steel. You can see that they've got sandbags, and in this case, they've just got some rocks and clips and clamps and all kinds of stuff for these. So there's lots of different options for constructing your tunnels. So just you know, get online and get some ideas if you feel like it. Okay, I just want to mention this because I know some folks do have actual farms, and there are some awesome options for farmers for season extension. So this is called a high tunnel, what's in this picture, and there is a program through NRCS, which is the Natural Resources Conservation Service, and they will actually pay up to 90% of the cost of building a high tunnel if you are a beginning farmer, and that means someone who has filed their Schedule F tax forms for less than 10 years. You need a farm number for your farm. You can call your local NRCS office to get started on that, or you can holler at me and I will give you more information about it. I think these are really cool, and more folks that have high tunnels, the better. And the cool thing about a high tunnel is that you can combine it. You'll see in this picture, and this is a farm up in Mountain City. You can see he's got a high tunnel, and then he's actually got these low tunnels, these little low tunnels that we are building inside the high tunnel, so he gets, you know, double the protection for his plants. And this guy is in zone, he's so high up in Mountain City, he's in zone 5, so he's a full zone down from us, and he grows 12 months out of the year. He keeps no problem keeping things alive in the high tunnel. Other options for farmers and even for, you know, gardeners is something called a caterpillar tunnel. So there's lots of different names. There's low tunnels, high tunnels, caterpillar tunnels. And sometimes people will use these interchangeably, and I try to keep them separate because to me they are separate things. So a caterpillar tunnel is something that's tall enough to walk through. So usually it's at least 6 feet tall, so you can walk through it, and it usually encompasses like 3 or 4 rows. Whereas like a low tunnel just covers 1 row, and then a high tunnel, you know, if we're talking rows, you know, that may be 6 or 7 rows under a high tunnel. So caterpillar tunnels, if you Google, you'll find lots and lots of instructions for building caterpillar tunnels. So this might be an option for someone who doesn't have a farm, but who wants kind of a bigger structure for season extension. So there are loads of instructions online for how to build these things. They're not too bad. Price-wise, you'll probably spend a few $100 on building caterpillar tunnel, versus if you try to build a high tunnel without support from NRCS, it's probably going to be $7,000 or $8,000. So high tunnels are a lot sturdier. They're going to withstand, you know, all kinds of weather. Whereas like these caterpillar tunnels, you know, they may not survive like a, you know, a huge wind event or really big snow, but we don't often get those, so they'll probably be fine most years. And again, you can use a larger structure and a smaller structure and really get lots of protection if it's going to get really cold. Okay, we are at a stopping point, and I will just make sure, folks, I don't see any questions unless I'm missing anything, but folks can pipe up if you have any questions so far. Anyone? That was perfectly clear and you understand everything?
You're just amazing, an amazing presenter.
Okay. Thanks, Roti, for like massaging my ego right there. Okay. All right. Well, we'll keep going. Again, just, you know, use the chat or the Q&A if you think of anything. Maybe. There we go. Okay. Okay. So that's season extension. If you, again, and we'll hand out those materials whenever we get them, hopefully by early October. And everyone will get the kind of the wire hoops and the 7-foot wide frost cloth. And so now we're going to kind of switch gears and we'll talk a little bit about garlic, which will also hopefully be here in early October. I absolutely love growing garlic. It's super easy. We'll be giving out, I think, a ½ pound of seed garlic to everyone. And so that should be enough to produce 2 or 3 pounds of harvestable garlic next year. So you want to plant garlic. The best time to plant garlic is in October. But if, you know, life happens and you really have until about early December to get garlic in the ground. Obviously the ground needs to not be frozen solid. So you'll have to do it at some point before, you know, you can't do it in the middle of a hard frost, but, you know, usually things warm up again. And, you know, so you have kind of a long window to get it. But it will grow best if you plant it in October. But I mean, honestly, some years I've planted it in December and had a pretty decent harvest. So it's fine. It's pretty forgiving. It's very hands off. You know, if you just keep it well mulched and, you know, and try to keep the weeds out of it as best you can. Otherwise, you don't really have to do anything to garlic until it's time to harvest. And then we buy organic, certified, disease-free seed garlic. And I say that because it's totally possible to plant garlic that you have saved from a previous year. And you can actually plant garlic that you buy from the grocery store. It'll grow, but because it's not certified disease-free, you don't know if it's carrying some kind of disease that you could introduce to your soil and, you know, ruin the rest of your garlic crop with that. So you run that risk anytime you save garlic. And in past years, this wasn't a problem, but I think the kind of disease pressure has become more heavy in recent years. And so I know a lot of folks are experiencing issues with that. So just keep that in mind. You feel free to experiment with saved garlic that maybe you buy from the farmer's market or whatever, but just know that, you know, you may run into issues with it. So planting garlic, we're going to provide you garlic that comes in whole heads, and you need to break them apart into individual cloves, which is what you see in this picture. Don't peel them, leave that little papery skin on them. But you do kind of want to inspect each clove, make sure it doesn't have any brown spots or any soft spots on it. So you really only want nice, healthy looking cloves. And you can kind of, and the size of the clove does kind of correlate to the size of the head of garlic that it's going to grow. So bigger cloves are going to grow bigger heads of garlic, smaller cloves, but they usually, bigger heads, bigger individual cloves usually mean less cloves per head, whereas smaller cloves will produce smaller heads, but they usually have a few more individual cloves on them. So it's kind of a trade-off. And then if you want to, and I don't always do this every year, you can soak the cloves in a gallon of water. For each gallon of water, 1 teaspoon of baking soda solution, and you just kind of mix that up and soak them overnight. And then you can dunk each clove in isopropyl alcohol right before you plant it. Don't leave this sitting for more than, you know, like 8 or 10 hours. In the baking soda water solution. And that would especially help prevent disease problems. So if you're using saved garlic, this may help keep, you know, disease off the cloves. So there's that. And then you want to plant your garlic in the row 4 to 6 inches apart, in rows that are 6 inches apart. And what I like to do is just go down the row and poke my holes in the ground, or pre-dig my holes. It's nice to use like a tape measure, like in this picture. And so you just get all your holes made, and you want them to be about 2 or 3 inches deep, so up to your the knuckle on your hand. And then you're going to place the cloves pointy side up, flat side down. That's really important because the flat side is where the roots are going to come out. So it really needs to be pointing the pointy side up and the flat side down. Put the garlic down in there. Gently pat the soil back down over the holes with like the flat side of a garden rake. And then again, you need to mulch over the garlic. You know, you want 6 inches of material, compost, shredded leaves, grass clippings, straw, whatever. You don't need to put any row cover over it. It's going to be totally fine. But the mulch, again, is going to insulate the soil and prevent the ground from frost heaving. That's really what can kill garlic, is if the soil heaves, and it'll separate the garlic from its roots and kill it. So the mulch is important to keep it. And the mulch also keeps the weeds down and keeps the soil moister, so you don't have to worry about watering. And really you don't even need, and in the spring you just, you know, leave the mulch. You'll see the garlic just kind of start popping through the mulch in the spring. So it's really just a hands off once you get everything prepped in the fall. Again, keep the weeds out. Garlic does not do well with weeds. We're providing a hardneck variety. There's, I think, 2 varieties of garlic. I could be wrong. There's a hardneck and a soft neck. So what you'll often see in the grocery store are soft neck varieties of garlic, but we're doing a hardneck, and that's going to produce what's called a scape. I guess I could have put a picture in here, but I didn't. But I'll talk more about this in say like June when it's time. So, but in June, the scape will pop up. You cut those off, and you do that to help the plant concentrate on growing a bigger bulb. You can eat the scapes; they taste really good. And then once you cut the scapes, it's usually maybe 2 weeks until it's time to harvest. So I will definitely send out more information about that, but I'm just kind of giving you an idea of what your timeline looks like. So you plant them in October, you harvest them in like late June, early July. And then you do need to kind of cure them a little bit. I'll talk more about that. But once you've cured them, then you usually get 5 to 6 months out of the garlic harvest. So it's just a really awesome crop. I love growing it. Oh, okay. Oops. Let's see if there were a couple questions.
Here's a question.
You want to just read them, Rosie?
Yeah. Do you think planting garlic I bought from a local farm would have a huge risk of disease?
I would probably do what I was talking about, soaking them. So like a teaspoon of baking soda and a gallon of water, soak them overnight. And then in the morning, kind of dip them in the alcohol right before you put them in the ground. And that'll probably help. I mean, I don't know I can't tell you what the risk is. There is a lot of garlic disease out there. And once it gets in your soil, it'll stay in your soil for like 20 years. So, but what you do is then you just can't plant garlic in that one spot and again. So, yeah, give it a go. But just keep in mind that things can happen. Was anything, is that the only question?
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you do want to buy more garlic, because again, we're only going to give out half a pound. There's a So True Seed down in Asheville, usually has a lot of really awesome garlic varieties. Southern Exposure Seed Exchange, they're up in Charlottesville, Virginia. They have good selection. I think probably the best prices. at least on the scale, you know, when I'm buying like 25 pounds of garlic, is Fedco. Seeds has a really awesome selection and good prices. So you have a lot of options if you want to explore them. The variety I think we're getting is German Red. It's one I get every year, and it just does really well in my experience, but there are hundreds and hundreds of varieties of garlic out there. So feel free to get some more. The certified disease-free garlic usually ranges in price from like $15 to $20 a pound. So it's a little pricey. You know, obviously you can go to the grocery store and buy it for like $4 or $5 a pound. So that's the difference, that making sure that it's disease-free, I guess, is you're going to pay for that. So feel free to experiment. You know, that's always the fun part of gardening. All right, let's see. Okay, sweet potato harvest. This is me and my 4-pound sweet potato. This is from a few years ago. September is a good time to harvest your potatoes, your sweet potatoes. Sweet potatoes are perennial, so technically they will keep growing until the first frost. However, frost does damage the tubers, so you don't want the plants to actually freeze. So if you want to leave them in the ground to get, you know, the maximum growth out of them, you really towards the end of September have to keep an eye on the weather forecast and just make sure that it's not going to dip down below 32 degrees. And if it does, you need to get out there and dig up your plants. You will get all kinds of random sizes and shapes and weights and all this on your sweet potatoes. You know, I get some questions every year. I'm like, these sweet potatoes don't look like what I get in the grocery store. So keep in mind that those potatoes at your grocery store are like the grade A, you know, #1 potatoes. So those are the ones that look great. And then all the rest of the oddball sweet potatoes go, you know, to the processor to become, you know, sweet potato fries or whatever. So so don't expect, you know, 20 pounds or, you know, however many you planted of perfect supermarket sweet potatoes. You're going to get some tiny ones and some ones that are like, you know, 1.5 feet long that are only like 1/2 inch long. I don't know, all kinds of weird stuff. Or this, you know, massive sweet potato that was almost the size of my head. So just keep that in mind. They all taste great. They're all totally edible. I made an extremely large pot of soup out of that one sweet potato. So, you know, send me your pictures if you do get big ones. I love seeing them. It's hilarious. Okay, best way to get them up is using a garden fork. You can use a shovel if you don't have a garden fork, but I prefer the garden fork to really get in there. You want to start you want to, you know, follow the vines. Sometimes the vines get kind of massive. You can actually go through and cut the vines out if you want to beforehand. So it'll help you identify the base of the plant first. And then you want to get about 1 foot away from the base of the plant, get the fork down in there, you know, trying to do it slowly and feel around if you hit any resistance. And then kind of lift up the soil and get the, you know, as gently as you can so you're not breaking off any sweet potato tubers, and just kind of see what's down there. The majority of your harvest is going to be right at the base of the plant. But the sweet potatoes will sometimes root along the vine. So as you're kind of pulling the vines out, if you notice any resistance, you'll see like a thin little tendril, a little root going down into the soil. So kind of poke around where that is, and sometimes you find more sweet potatoes. They're usually smaller, but some of them are pretty good size, just where the vines have rooted. So check as you're digging up, because you may get more sweet potatoes. And then you need to cure sweet potatoes. The optimal conditions is to set them in an 85-degree room with, you know, 85% humidity. So, you know, you want to have a heater and a humidifier, and then you know, put them in an open box like this and let them cure at that kind of warm and moist temperature for 5 to 7 days. You could probably set this up easiest in like a basement bathroom. However, I don't usually do this. It's hard to do at home. I mean, you know, if you're a farmer growing, you know, hundreds or thousands of pounds of sweet potatoes for market, then yes, you want to cure them properly. If you're a home gardener, it's still good to wait like a month or so from harvest before you start eating them. And that will help them, even if they're just kind of in a box, you know, under your like dining room table or something. That will still give them some time for sugar development. So they'll be sweeter than if you just eat them right from the ground. So you don't actually want cold storage for sweet potatoes. They do need to be kept ideally at 60 degrees Fahrenheit with 85% humidity. Again, I don't really do this. Just don't store them don't let them be in a spot where the temperature is going to get less than 50 degrees, because otherwise the tubers will be damaged. Honestly, I just stick them in a crate in my dining room, put some cardboard over the top of them, and I usually still get 4 or 5 months out of them. Maybe they're not the absolute sweetest they would be if I cured them, but it's totally fine. I don't really notice. And then with a lot of storage crops like sweet potatoes, with pumpkins, winter squash, that kind of thing, you know, don't save them for some time in the future. You really, I mean, besides waiting them to that initial curing period, you know, quality really starts to go downhill on storage crops after like January, February. So, you know, eat them for the fall and early winter. Don't try to just keep them around. So they might go bad in the meantime. All right, questions about garlic, sweet potatoes, anything we've gone over so far? Okay. All right. Some other fall stuff to go over. It's really good to clean out your garden. You don't have to do it like September, but you know, anytime there's like a nice day, like November, December, it's good to just get in there and get everything out. Although if you do it earlier and you can get your cover crops sown, September is really the ideal month to put cover crops on the ground. If you wait much longer, you know, you're just gonna get your rye and your well, I can't remember what the other, if we got wheat or oats or something for the other grain, but definitely the rye will keep growing. Even into December, you can plant rye, but the other stuff really needs a couple more months than that to really do the work. So if you can, just kind of start clearing out anything that's kind of dead or dying this month. Like my tomatoes look awful, so I'm going to try to get them out in the next week or two and get cover crops in that spot. And then if you don't want to do cover crops, then really putting down a layer of mulch, like if you can get shredded leaves delivered or grass clippings or straw, whatever you have on hand, putting on a really thick layer of mulch is I think almost as good as doing cover crops in terms of helping you build more quality soil over your garden. Whatever you do, just don't let your soil go bare over the winter. That's probably the worst thing you can do in terms of soil health. You know, you get a lot of nutrient runoff. I covered this in our last workshop, nutrient runoff, you know, heaving of the ground, erosion, that kind of thing. So, and then also this time of year, it's important not to let the weeds go to seed. There's plants like lamb's quarters or pigweed that can produce like 100,000 seeds per plant. So even one plant going to seed, that means there's thousands and thousands and thousands of weed seeds that are just going to be on the surface of your soil waiting for next year to germinate. So really the best thing you can do to prevent weeds next year is to prevent weeds from going to seed this year. So keep an eye on it, even if that just means like mowing your weeds down because they've gotten so tall. Just try to keep them from going to seed. Cleaning up plant material from this is important. You don't get that around because that's all diseased plant material that if you leave it, they're just going to be waiting. Diseases are just going to be waiting for stuff next year to go in the ground. So And I don't really like to compost this kind of stuff unless you are, a really good active composter. Because if you're not managing your compost pile, if you're just kind of letting things rot out, by the back of the fence, then often you're just eating weed seeds and crop diseases. So compost, you get up above 140 degrees, and that means a lot of aeration and turning and monitoring with soil thermometers. So keep that in mind. It's best, just to put it in the burn pile or trash it if you can, or just if you do stick it out by the back of the fence, then don't use that on your garden next year, on your vegetable garden next year. You can use it on your flower bed or something. And then also fall, winter is a good time to clean and organize your garden tools. Most tools will benefit from being sharpened and oiled. That's too much to go into right now, but totally you can Google instructions. There's lots of how-tos, YouTube videos, that kind of thing on tool sharpening. Take care of your tools, because a lot of these things will last, a really long time. And then the final thing you can do is to just sit down, take a minute to sit down with your garden plan that you drew up in the spring, and then just make any notes about what you did differently, what plants did really well, what didn't make it, what did you like, did you really hate, what do you want to try next year. So just kind of compile, take time and just compile your notes so that next spring, because you may think now I'm gonna remember this. You're not gonna remember in the spring. You're gonna forget stuff. So make notes so you have it, and then sign up for seed catalogs. It's my favorite activity. Like come December when they start arriving in the mail, it's like the best thing ever. To just get some hot chocolate or hot cup of tea and sit down with your seed catalogs when everything's dark and dreary, and it's the best time. All right, I think that's the end of my presentation. And so if folks have any questions.
I do.
Yeah.
I'm wondering how many of the hoops and how much of the fabric are you giving out, so I know how to plan if I need to get more.
Yeah, I think about 100 row feet.
Okay.
Is what we're gonna give out. I think that's what I purchased. And we have a few extra supplies too from last year. So yeah, I'll count on at least 100 row feet.
Awesome.
Maybe a little more. Yeah,
Thank
great
you.
question. Yeah.
And then can you recommend some of your go-to good seed companies, and how do you feel about Seed Savers?
Seed Savers is fine. I really like, if you're looking for like heirloom seeds, I really love So True Seed. They're a company down in Asheville. And also Southern Exposure Seed Exchange. They both specialize in varieties that do really well right here in the Southeast. So if you're looking for heirlooms and that kind of thing that you might get from Seed Savers, you would probably do better with varieties coming from those two companies. I also really love Johnny's, and I love the Fedco seeds. I probably get seed catalogs from 15 or 16 companies, because I just love seed catalogs. What else do I get? High mowing seed, territorial seed, both. So Johnny's, high mowing, and territorial are probably the three big ones for commercial farmers. They have a lot of really awesome hybrids that do well. Yeah, Seed Savers. I don't know. That's what I'm coming up with off the top of my head. Okay. Another question. If we are continuing with winter lettuces, kale, cabbage, and such, we don't put the ground cover seed. Yeah, you don't put the cover crop where you're growing stuff. It's only for areas where you don't have anything growing. because the whole point is to keep live roots in the ground is what you're aiming for. So yes, the cover crop is just for places where you don't have stuff growing. So if you happen to have filled your entire garden with winter stuff, great, then you don't need the cover crop. Does that answer that? Great. Any other questions? Okay. Thanks, y'all. You know, oh, something just popped up
Thanks for
in the
helping.
chat. Yes. Okay. Great. Yeah, we're always available by email. We'll be in touch as soon as I get like shipping notices on materials. I'll set up a date for us. So hopefully by first week or two in October, we'll have everything out. Our first frost is usually not till the end of October. So just pray that all the wacky weather we've had the last few years doesn't mean we're going to get a frost in like September or something.
Also, it's Lexi's birthday tomorrow.
Oh,
so
yeah.
happy birthday to Lexi.
Happy birthday.
Yeah. Yeah, so I may not respond to emails tomorrow if you send them, but yeah.
But I will be working as well, so you can send them to me.
You can always email Roseanne. All right, thanks, y'all. This has been tons of fun. We have put in our application for funding for 2021. I don't anticipate that they will tell us, no, we're not funding you anymore, Appalachia. So we will probably get some kind of funding. And so folks who have been in the program for a year are allowed to return for a second year. So, and I will consider extensions beyond 2 years if, you know, there's some kind of extenuating circumstances and you really need the support from us. So feel free to petition your case if you feel like you need a third year. And we will be, so once we get confirmed on our funding, I'll send out a little form for folks to let us know if they want to come back for a second year. And then we will be accepting anywhere from like 25 or 35 to 35 new folks for the program. So feel free to let friends and family know that this will be coming up. Applications for new gardeners open in January. So that'll be coming along. And again, Rosie is going to send out a survey about what you learned this year. So please keep an eye on that.
They're sending it out tomorrow. So
okay, tomorrow, yes.
Keep an eye
So
on it.
yeah. All right. Any last questions?
Just wanted to say thank you. This has really been invaluable. I really appreciate everything you guys do.
Awesome. Thank you.
Happy to hear it.
We love doing it. Okay. Thank you all. And I think that'll be it. So have a good night. And happy fall gardening.
Yay.
Yay. All right. Good night, all. I am turning this off. Bye.